Hello, Junior Achievement students. I'm Kristen. You've met me before. And today we are so lucky to have Jason Yelowitz. Junior Jason.
Hi, how are
Hi, how are
you?
you? Good, thank you. So I just want to jump right in. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, fantastic. So some people may recognize my face because I actually volunteer with Junior Achievement myself in Nevada. Um, and the reason I do, I'm just very passionate about helping students learn about things like entrepreneurship and financial literacy. So my own background, um, I, my job nowadays is I'm a business broker. I sell businesses. So if you think about any business that you may visit, you go to get your hair cut or your parents go to get their oil changed, that's a business. And sometimes the owner of the business wants to sell it. So I help business owners sell their businesses. But before that, and what I'm most excited about, I was an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is somebody who starts businesses. I've started 7 different companies, and what gets me excited is I like starting companies. I like having ideas and then trying them in the real world to see if they work. I grew up in a very normal kind of middle-class household. My parents both went to work all day. And the thing I remembered about that was they just didn't seem very happy. They would come home at the end of the day. They would either complain about work or didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't very exciting to them. Now you couple this with the fact that I'm just somebody that doesn't like to be told what to do. I was never good having bosses. I had a really tendency to talk back to anybody in a position of authority, whether it was a teacher, a policeman, a boss, anyone. I've got a big mouth. So when you couple the fact that I couldn't work for anybody with the fact that I had a lot of ideas, I really had no choice but to be an entrepreneur. Now the problem, the challenge with being an entrepreneur is it's different than getting a regular job. When you get a regular job, usually there's a boss and they offer you a salary. You get paid every month or every 2 weeks to do the work that they ask you to do. And that gives you stability. When you know you've got a paycheck coming, it's a lot easier to feel confident that you can pay the rent, that you can put food on the table, that kind of thing. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't have the safety, which is scary, but there's also a lot of what we call upside. So if you start a company and you do well, you can make a whole lot more money than you would make working for somebody. So there's a trade-off. There's always trade-offs in, anything related to career, and everyone has to make decisions. So for instance, some of our students watching, they may graduate high school and get a job offer and have to decide between taking a job today versus going to college. Many of them likely will go to college, and then you have to choose between, do I take a job that's in town close to my siblings and my parents, or do I take a job where I think there's a lot more potential, but it's in Chicago and I have to move? So there's always trade-offs. So being an entrepreneur, the trade-off is stability versus the upside potential to grow a business that can make you feel really good and can make a lot of money. And there's also the chance to lose a lot of money as an entrepreneur. So there's a lot more risk. So one thing I think is very valuable for not only students, but older people. I see a lot of people that get excited about being an entrepreneur when they're already older. They might be 30 or 40 or 50 years old when they say, I'm ready to start a business. One thing I see a lot is people are not very good at evaluating the risks. Most people make what we call a business plan. A business plan is basically a bunch of pieces of paper that, one page says, I'm selling products. Let's pretend I'm selling pens. I'm selling pens. This month I'm going to sell 100 of them. Next month I'm going to sell 200. Next month I'm going to sell 500. You know, and they've got these charts that look really nice. And they say, I'm going to have the pen store. I'm going to rent this storefront and sell my pens, and it's going to work great. And the challenge is that on paper, on their business plan, it looks phenomenal. What most people don't have is a realistic understanding of the risk. What happens if you're running your pen store and a global pandemic happens and the governor says, close your store? Do you still have to pay the rent? Probably. You're going to have to talk to the person that owns the building and discuss that. Are the customers still going to be showing up? Probably not. What if there is no pandemic and nobody wants to buy pens at a store because, or they don't want to go to a store devoted to pens because you can grab pens when you happen to be at Walmart or when you're shopping on Amazon? So what I find is a lot of people have an entrepreneurial dream, and most people I talk to, once you get into conversation, will discover that almost everyone has had an idea for a business at some point in their life. I know you've run some businesses that were fun, but you definitely realize the headaches and the challenges of being the boss is fun, but you're always answering to somebody, usually to the customers, the people buying your service or your products. So what I find is everyone's got the dream. The challenge is, how do you hone the dream into a realistic opportunity where you minimize the risk? So like I said, I've started 7 companies. The first 3 were an absolute wipeout. But the good news is I didn't personally, I lost money on one, but not on the other. So should I walk through a little bit how that worked?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
Please.
So anybody watching this has grown up with the internet, and that's been around for their whole life. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, the internet was brand new. It just didn't exist. We didn't have these laptops. We didn't have Zoom to talk to each other. So anything on the internet was exciting. I had some experience running a house painting business. So I understood home improvement. So for the students, sometimes I'm sure you've noticed there are people working in your parents' house to fix the air conditioner or paint the house or fix the toilet or something like that. Those are called contractors. So I had the idea, the internet was new, and I understood home improvements. I thought, what if I build a website to introduce homeowners to home improvement contractors? So it was just an idea. Now, the challenge is I didn't have anything. I had no resources. I didn't have money to build a website. I didn't have employees to help me. So what I had to do was raise money. I went out and asked people I knew, do you want to invest in my company? And I got a number of people to invest. That was called seed money or angel investing. So what it means was a number of people each put in, a decent chunk of money, like maybe $50,000 each, until I had maybe $300,000. And I used that money to hire people and build the first version of the website, and that kind of thing. The business still wasn't operational, so then I had to raise more money. So I went to what's called a venture capitalist, a VC. A venture capitalist is like a company that gives money to entrepreneurs to build their business. I got very lucky. A VC gave my company about $10 million. And in exchange for that, they got to own a big part of my company. So I was no longer the owner. I owned part of it, and they owned part of it. Now, the problem is, an analogy that some of our local students might understand is we got out over our skis, meaning I raised a lot of money. I had a lot of employees, but we didn't have enough customers. So you need customers for any business to work, and there just weren't enough of them. So this company went out of business. Now, the good news for me was it wasn't my money that was being risked, so I didn't lose any. So one of the big things I say to every entrepreneur is figure out how to minimize your risk. You're going to have to take some, but minimize it as much as you can. My next business was also a wipeout. So I'm sure many of our students have studied the events of September 11th, 2001. It was a horrible day. Terrorists attacked America. All of us that were grown-ups at the time were scared and sad. Anyway, the business I started was a pickup and delivery dry cleaning service. I was gonna drive to people's houses and pick up their dry cleaning and bring it back a couple days later. All of my marketing, so advertising, was to put flyers on people's doors. I was living in Chicago, around the greater Chicago area. All of my flyers went out the morning of September 11th. The phone did not ring. There were no customers. It was horrible. And that business didn't last either, and it was very sad. And the third business, and you have to understand, every business, you put your heart into it. So if it doesn't work, you just feel like you got beaten up. It feels horrible. So the point is, learn from your mistakes. Be honest. What could I have done better? What should I have done differently? My third business, I got other people to fund it. They put in the money. I did the work. That business did okay. We were selling windows. So sometimes people replace the windows in their house. I hired a bunch of students, college students, to sell windows, and they were going door to door. They were knocking on doors and saying, would you like to replace your windows? That business did okay, but the sales weren't high enough to keep my partners happy, so they decided to shut it down. Now you can imagine, after 3 strikes, I felt horrible. I thought, man, this entrepreneur thing is hard. I went back to where I grew up in California. I took a job, and then I got an idea for my next business. Now, the next one did great. I started a website, and some students may have read about the housing bubble of the early 2000s. Everybody wanted to buy a house. Anyone you talked to wanted to buy a house, a second house, a third house. So my idea was, it's too risky to buy houses because if the housing market goes down, you can lose a lot of money. So then I thought, what's a way that I can participate in this exciting opportunity without taking risk? So I built a website, and I hired a friend to do it for me, and that was really cheap. It was a couple $100. And then I started, on the website, I said, are you somebody looking for a home? Fill out a little form, put in your name, and then I will connect you with a real estate agent that can help you find a home. This business took off. My very first day that I started the website, I think 300 people filled out my form. I had 300 what we call leads. That number kept going up until I was getting up to 2,000 people on my website per day filling out my form, and I would sell that information to realtors who wanted to contact them. This was the greatest business ever. It was automated. I didn't have to work. I only worked about 30 minutes a day looking at a spreadsheet, deciding, how did things go yesterday? What's different tomorrow? And then I spent the rest of my day watching Netflix, snowboarding, just having fun. And this business was great while it lasted. Now, the only way that this business would have existed was from all the mistakes of the previous businesses and stopping to learn from them. So the first one, I raised a lot of money from other people, and it didn't work. The lesson I learned was, you don't need a lot of money to start a business. You just need an idea that works quickly. The second business, I had bad timing. I happened to launch it on the day of a horrible national event. There's no way I could have known that in advance, but the lesson was, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't blow your entire marketing budget, all the money that I had for marketing, in one day. There was a lesson there. The third lesson was that the third business, I had partners, we had sales. It just wasn't high enough. The sales weren't high enough to keep my partners interested. So the lesson there is, for me personally, I realize I'm not a partner guy. I like to do things on my own. Some people are good with partners, if you're going to be somebody that works with partners, make sure everyone has realistic expectations, that you're all thinking the same. Have as many conversations as you have to have until everybody has the same goals. Because if you think, if your goals are here and your partner's goals are there, it's going to lead to issues later. For me, the answer was simple: just don't have partners. And on my fourth business, I took all those lessons and I thought, how can I start a business without spending a lot of money, without having partner issues, without putting all my eggs in one basket? And it all came together to make a business that did phenomenally well without a lot of work. But it took 10 years of mistakes before I got to that point. Since then, I've started other businesses and all of them have been successful. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think once you learn how to do something, you get better at it each time. You know, for some of our students that play soccer, they're probably going to be good if they try another sport. There are some transferable skills.
Sorry, Jason, I'm going to stop you just for 1 second. All right, guys, sorry about that. I'm working from home, so my dogs decided to interrupt. But Jason, if you can remember where you are, can you go back to learning from your past mistakes? And
Sure. Okay. So nowadays, I'm a grown up. I'm in charge of my own day-to-day activity. I don't have to answer to anyone, and those things are great. And I end up talking to a lot of people that want to start businesses. Some of them are students. Some of them are older than me. So I do feel like it's almost universal. I think most people, if given a choice, would love to work for themselves and have a business. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, here's my idea, what do you think? My answer is always, I don't have a clue. I don't know if it's a good idea. And that's pretty honest, because you think about, if I knew that my first 3 businesses were going to wipe out, I never would have started them. I thought they were great ideas. And it turns out I still think the ideas were good. I think my execution, the way that I ran them, was not. But you need it all to come together. So when someone comes to me and says, I've got an idea, what do you think? I say, it doesn't matter what I think. The only opinion that matters is your customers. Your customers are the ones that pay for whatever you're offering. And when they pay for it, that's how you get paid. So the trick, in my opinion, is to figure out how to test your idea before you dive. A lot of people say, dive in, go full board, make it happen. I disagree 100%. I say, figure out how to test your idea as easily and cheap as possible before you really, really, really commit. And let me give you 2 examples. Someone might come to me and say, I've got an idea for a service business where I'm gonna hire people to shovel snow out of driveways. And then when I make enough money, I'll buy a snowplow. Okay, and they might say, is that a good business? And my answer is, I don't know. Somebody else might come to me and say, I want to open up a sushi restaurant in Reno. Is that a good idea? I say, I don't know. But here's the difference. The first idea, you can test that really easily. Go knock on doors in the winter and say, would you like me to shovel your driveway? It costs you nothing to go knock on doors, and you can find out if people say yes or no and how much they're willing to pay. Now let's look at the next idea. Someone wants to open a sushi restaurant. There's no way to test that idea unless you spend a whole lot of money. If you want to open a restaurant, you have to rent a space. You have to commit to paying rent for several years probably. You need to spend a lot of money on the signs, the marketing, the menus. You have to hire sushi chefs. You have to hire servers. So it's much harder to test an idea. Now, you might have the best sushi in the Western United States, but personally, I don't like any idea where you need to risk a whole lot of money before you can find out if customers are going to like it. So I always lean towards ideas where there's a way to test it cheap. Now, most ideas, a lot of times people aren't, I think you need to think small at first in order to think big. Meaning someone might have an idea for building something. Maybe they'll say, I came up with a new way of making paper where we don't need to use trees. We can create paper. We can recycle plastic into making paper. And they'll have a grand idea how to do that. Okay, it sounds great in theory. Now, the question becomes, how much can they figure out before they take risk? They have to talk to manufacturers. How much will it cost to get the recycled plastic to make your paper? How much does it cost to produce the paper? Once you have it, where are you going to sell it? How can I test this? How can I find out, maybe to make this product, instead of selling a pad of paper for $1.99, you're going to have to charge $6 because it costs you more. I don't know if people are going to pay $6. How can you test that? Well, you could probably go on eBay or you could go on GoFundMe and say, I've got this $6 pad of paper. Are you interested in investing to help me make it happen? And would you pay $6 to buy a pad of paper if it was recycled out of old plastic? And what you want to do is you want to get as many data points as possible. A data point is a piece of information that can help you make a better decision. So what we want to do is move away from, I've got a great idea, I'm excited, it's all about my emotion, and move it more towards, I have an idea that I like, I thought I could do this, but based on my research and my data points, I have to pivot. I have to do it a little bit differently than I thought. One of the big things that I say to would-be entrepreneurs, to potential people that are potentially going to start a business, is don't fall in love with your own idea. Obviously, you need to like your idea or you wouldn't do it. But the only opinions that matter are the opinions of the customers, people that will voluntarily pay for whatever you're doing. So you need to listen to potential customers and be realistic, and don't just be so stubborn. Nope, I want to do it my way, because the customers are your boss. You may not have a boss where you have to report every day, but the customers have a choice. You could be selling a pad of recycled paper. You could have a sushi restaurant. You could be selling snowplow services. You need to listen to what the customers want and what they're willing to pay, and then figure out, is there a business there, or should I move on to the next idea? Now, the cautionary tale, I know some people that have fallen so much in love with their own idea that they spend their life savings trying to make it work. They spend 10 years of their life trying to make it work. And the reality is, if you don't have customers pretty quick, if you don't have people willing to pay for what you're offering within the first, week or 2 weeks or month, your idea may not be as good as you think it is. And in my opinion, there's no shame in admitting, hey, my idea wasn't as good as I thought it was. Now, with my own example, if I had been stubborn and said, my ideas are great, I'd still be working on my first business and I never would have gotten anywhere. But by being able to say, hey, I made some mistakes, let me learn from them, it helped me discover other niches. A niche is an area where there's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to sell something. I discovered other niches because I was willing to admit to myself, I made a mistake on that last business. Let me do better on the next one. So I think the characteristics that help people are, you need to be humble and admit if you made a mistake. But you need to have belief in yourself enough to start an idea. And there's a couple skills that I found have been very helpful for figuring out what niches to go into. And some of these are taught in school. Reading is huge. I read all day, mostly nonfiction. So I'll read about everything from business to finance to product ideas, to health, to history. All of this stuff helps. It gives you a better overview of how the world works, how people think, and it not only makes you a more well-rounded person, but it helps you zone in on ideas that might work. Math. Math is absolutely critical. And I know some people hate it, some people love it. It's important to at least be proficient, because every business idea comes down to dollars and cents. And unless customers are willing to pay more dollars than it costs you to run the business, you don't have a business. It's important to be able to do, it's not super sophisticated equations. I never use calculus in any of my businesses, even though that's a good skill. But I use algebra, I use geometry to do equations to figure out if something makes business sense. Critical thinking is another super important skill. Critical thinking basically means just because someone says something, you don't have to accept it as being true. Even if it's somebody you respect, it might be your mom, it might be your dad, it might be your priest, it might be your teacher. Most people, including me and including you, we have opinions. It's very important to be able to differentiate someone's opinion versus fact. So a lot of us, we hear something that from someone we respect and we nod our heads and say that must be true. Okay, it usually is true according to their opinion. Critical thinking, though, is the ability to look at the other side of the argument and say, well, I agree with you on some things, I don't agree with you on others. The ability to be a critical thinker is very important for not only recognizing good niches for business, but also avoiding mistakes. In our world, in the last 20 years, we have had what we call asset bubbles. An asset bubble is where everybody thinks the same way and then they all try and buy something. So I mentioned the housing bubble earlier in the interview. How everyone thought, if I buy a house, it only goes up in value. That was what we call groupthink. Everybody was thinking the same way. And it was a mistake, because a lot of people that bought houses, their houses ended up going down in value for many years instead of going up. The way to avoid that would be critical thinking and say, well, wait a minute. Why are houses all of a sudden so valuable? They weren't this valuable 5 years ago. What's changed? And it just means asking hard questions of yourself before you take action. And then the final skill that I've found invaluable is empathy. Empathy is the ability to listen to others and experience what they're feeling and taking it seriously. The reason this is very important is not only do I think it makes you a better human being. People with empathy, I think, are much more interesting to be around, but it can really help for anyone who wants to start a business. You have to understand how your customers feel. Maybe you think, hey, for $6, everybody should buy a pad made of recycled plastic because it's great for the planet. That's great. What you may not realize is a lot of your customers can't afford $6 for a pad of paper because they just don't earn enough to be able to afford that. So you need to figure out, how can I make this pad of paper more affordable for $3 instead of $6? So empathy, the ability to understand the feelings of others is another skill. So reading, math, critical thinking, and empathy are the things that have, in my opinion, really helped out career-wise. And I think those are great things. Anyone watching, whether you're in 2nd grade or 12th grade, you can do reading on your own for fun. You can practice math. You go out to the restaurant, calculate the tip in your head instead of on paper. Learn to think in mathematical terms. Critical thinking, when one of your friends says something, just stop and think, is that the absolute truth, or is there a different side to the argument? And learn how to discuss things in a way that's not a fight, but you can say, okay, I like your point. Have you thought of this other point? And then empathy, you may not even realize it. Your friends might have a very different situation than you do. You may not even be aware, you know, maybe your family is going on a ski trip to Aspen and your friends are not because their family can't afford it. That's empathy, to understand that they're in a different situation and it's not very nice to rub it in their face all about your ski trip. These are all skills that students can practice that I think are very valuable, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or you don't. A lot of people, you know, want to have a job with security. The same skills, I think, will help you in a career. So that's kind of the summary of some of the stuff I've done and some of the stuff that I've learned along the way.
That was amazing. I actually really love that your story started with failure, because had you just got on here and been successful, we wouldn't have seen that you have to persevere that. We wouldn't have seen that it was an opportunity for learning. So I really love that. And I never really hear much about empathy. So that was a bonus also. And you hit on almost all of my questions. There are just a couple that I want to ask your advice on too. Right now, we're obviously in the middle of the coronavirus crisis. So how could you prepare for not just this crisis, but any financial crisis?
Okay, great questions. So the best way to prepare for a financial crisis is you have to understand none of us knows when it's going to happen. So the only thing you can do is prepare ahead of time by saving money. So what I say when I teach JA classes is pay yourself first. What that means is when you get a job, you'll get a paycheck. And every time you get a paycheck, there's a lot of things that would be fun to buy. You want to go on a trip, you want to go out to restaurants. There's some things you have to pay. You have to pay your rent, you have to pay for your car. Before you do any of that, take 10% of the money and save it for the future. Put it in what we call emergency savings, and you don't touch it. You just leave it there. Now, okay, once you've taken your 10% every month, take the rest of it, have fun, do whatever you want. But every time you get a paycheck, take that first chunk and save it, pay yourself first. Then when a financial crisis happens, you're prepared. You've got savings. Savings gives you dignity. You're not having to beg other people to help you because you've already planned. And I'm sorry, Kristen, what was the first part of the question?
That was really it. Just how can we prepare for something like this, whether it's coronavirus or any sort of crisis?
Yeah, and then the other thing is surprises happen. So I'll give you a good example. My kids take martial arts lessons, which is something you do in person, face to face. And obviously, this coronavirus pandemic took us all by surprise. You can't do that. You can't be face-to-face grappling. I give a lot of credit to their instructors who are entrepreneurs. They run the business. When coronavirus hit, we were all in shock. Within a week, their instructors started doing lessons on Zoom so that we could watch them on the computer of how to do karate moves. And then they started teaching classes on Zoom where they could see my kids and my kids could see them. This is called pivoting. No one expected the coronavirus. Very quickly, instead of feeling sorry for themselves, the entrepreneurs in charge of the martial arts company pivoted. And I think it's great. And their business is still doing well. I still pay them every month because I know that they're still teaching my kids, even though it's not the way that we all thought it would be. So you got to be nimble, prepared to change, but also prepare for emergencies.
Perfect. And now my favorite question, any just general words of wisdom, life advice for our students?
Avoid debt, period. So debt, the definition of debt is borrowing from the future to get something today. Examples of debt. You may have seen your parents have a credit card. That means during the month they bought stuff and then the bill comes at the end of the month. When you've got a credit card, pay it in full every month, even if it hurts, pay it off. There's other types of debt. People borrow money to go to college. The rationale, the reason they do it is if I borrow money today and go to college, I'll get a better job in the future. Okay, that's well and good, except a lot of people borrow way too much money. So that you want to limit it to what's the least that I need to borrow to get through a college that will get me to where I want to go. Another thing people borrow for is to buy a house. Usually it's a decent idea, but the problem is people buy more house than they can afford because they're getting a loan. So you need to be very critical. Anytime you're going to borrow money, you are taking on debt. Be extremely careful with debt, because the people that are giving you the loan, they're always going to be nice, happy, shiny people. They're making money off the interest payments that you're going to do. And they're always going to tell you it's a great idea. You don't want to be getting your advice from the people that you're buying something from. The phrase my dad used to use is, don't ask your barber if you need a haircut. The reason is he or she is always going to say yes. It's the same with debt. Don't ask a student lending department whether you should take out a loan. Do your own calculations, use critical thinking, and decide if and how much you need. But in general, the rule of thumb is keep your debt very manageable. And the people I know who are happiest in life have not that much debt, and they keep it manageable. The people I know that are always stressed out tend to have too much debt. So that's a really important life lesson, I think.
Especially for our graduating seniors, I would think, that are about to be in that world where everyone's offering them credit cards and, like you said, student loans. So great advice.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jason. We're lucky to have you as part of Junior Achievement, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much, Kristen. All right, take care.